Stephen Smith, a partner at Right and Right Architects. We led the design of the master plan from early concept right through to the construction stage. There was a series of factors that came together at the start of the project, which is normally the case, kind of what was the catalyst. The building was in desperate need of refurbishment. There were systems that hadn't been replaced for 70, 100 years in some cases. Some of the roofs were failing. We had quite major leaks in some areas. There was high presence of asbestos, which was a huge risk to people using the building. And that was allied to the need to do something really progressive. So there was a desperate need to upgrade. But what was the point of difference, perhaps, was the opportunity to do something highly sustainable, which is difficult in this grade 1 setting. But the commitment to zero carbon, stimulated by the climate change emergency, was an amazing incentive to do something quite remarkable with the building.
Hi, my name's Tosin Oladipo, chaplain to the Archbishop of Canterbury. So Lambeth Palace is a place of prayer and worship. I'm sitting in one of the chapels. We have two, and it's a place where people pray, people serve, and it's a place of welcome and hospitality. And that's just about expressing our Christian faith. It's what Jesus calls us to do. This has been a place where that has been the story for over 800 years. And it's great to see work being done to ensure that that work, the work of service, the work of hospitality, can continue for centuries and centuries to come.
Hello, I'm Michael Minter. I'm Director of Bishoprics and Cathedrals and Lambeth Palace Library. I work for the Church Commissioners. I've done for about 6 years and been honoured to run this project at the Palace the last few years. So when I started with the Commissioner 6 years ago, they were already talking about a potential project here. And at the time, it was a project to just repair the sort of electric cables and the plumbing, because there have been a few issues with those. As the time went on, we realised that so much more needed to be done in the Palace. And so we looked to do a master plan. So we approached a number of architects. Right and Right were the winning architects to do a master plan for the whole site. And the whole site meant including the cottages and what we could do for the future for the whole palace. We soon realised that was going to be well over any budget we could possibly spend on the palace. And so we trimmed the project back, but enough to make it a safe, secure, accessible site, and also put some elements of net zero, because that was about the same time that the Church of England General Synod agreed that we should be hitting net zero by 2030. So quite a few elements were added to the project after the scope was written, just in that area.
I'm Leanna Boxall, Conservation Architect and Project Architect from Right and Right. So I was involved in the development of the master plan, which Right and Right were commissioned to do at the end of 2019. And working with the design team and the church commissioners, developed the initial proposals for the general master plan, and out of that for the refurbishment project at Lambeth. As project architect, you're kind of responsible for the design of the project, but as a conservation architect, you're meant to kind of have a look at and be a kind of custodian for the heritage of the building as well. So you have to consider what is historically important, both in terms of fabric, but also in terms of communal history as well. What happened in the past that makes the building important, in order to make sure that the proposals are sensitive and appropriate going forward.
So Lambeth Palace really is a unique building. It's the home and London home and office of the Archbishop of Canterbury and all who work with the Archbishop. It's a place for the Church of England, it's a place for the Anglican communion. It really is a hub. People talk about Lambeth Palace in more ways than one. As a building, it's grade 1. It dates back hundreds and hundreds of years. People have lived here for all that time. It's been through a few developments over its time, but no major works for 70 years. So in the last 70 years, we've done a few things, a few bit here. The back of the building was blown out back in the war, so at that time, but since then so little has been done. So to work on a project of this stature, and it's just a fantastic opportunity, which I've loved. It's had its challenges, of course, all projects do, particularly of this nature, but to work on such an important historic building has been great.
We've used, in some cases, some quite conventional systems like photovoltaics, but you don't see them. They're hidden away. And I think the key to this project as a learning is to show how it can be done in a listed setting. So a lot of the things that we have done, like putting an air source heat pump in, is incredibly easy to do on a new building. You just put it up on the roof if you're doing a big warehouse. Here they had to be hidden away in the historic setting. So this gives kind of belief and confidence to people who maybe think there are challenges or that are too big to overcome, and they'll take a much easier solution that isn't as good in terms of energy. So this project's proven quite a lot of technologies people want to use can actually be done in quite complex and highly protected setting.
Hi, I'm Emily G, and I'm the Director for Cathedral and Church Buildings at the Church of England. So the Lambeth Palace project is really important because it shows how one can really balance historic conservation with sustainability into the future, and also thinking about how to make buildings more accessible and more environmentally comfortable for everyone who lives and works here. So Lambeth Palace has deep significance to the nation, to the Church of England, and to the wider community. It has rich historic and architectural significance, and of course historic importance for the church. But it's also a place that needs repair, needs conservation, and needs a way of thinking about the future. One of the really important parts of any historic building is its windows, and that was an important consideration as part of the Lambeth Palace project. Partly because the windows here are so significant on the facade, and this was a way of thinking about how to bring back the windows almost more to how it looked in its original form, but also thinking about the really crucial environmental sustainability. We know that windows can be really leaky, and they are an area where we had a lot of heat loss in buildings. So when we're trying to manage conservation with sustainability, it's really important to think about the windows as part of what we call a fabric-first approach. And the approach here, with really brilliant advice from conservation architects and from colleagues at Historic England and Lambeth Palace and Lambeth Council, was to think about how to add secondary glazing, really thoughtfully done secondary glazing on the inside of the building to manage heat loss, but to be done in such a way that it matches and fits beautifully and neatly behind the historic stonework, the mullions and muntins, and those lovely cusped heads of those lancet windows there. So it looks more like it did originally, but also has this state-of-the-art, beautifully done conservation technology inside to allow the building to breathe, but also be warm and wind tight in the winter, and to contribute to net zero goals while also achieving this really remarkable conservation facade to the building. So what's really lovely here is how the team have added secondary glazing on the inside of the original windows, beautifully done in a very traditional format of timber-framed sash windows with very elegant glazing bars. But they've been designed in a way that the main top and bottom of the two sets of sash windows is aligned perfectly with the mullion there that goes across the original stone windows, and the arched heads are just tucked beautifully behind those cusped trefoil heads of the original stone windows on the outside. So those profiles of the original building shine through beautifully on the outside of the building, and indeed on the inside as well, visually, but allow the building inside to be kept warm and weather tight. So it's all part of their contribution to net zero and sustainability, but also respecting the really significant historic fabric that's listed at Grade 1.
Hello, I'm Ed Clark. I'm the Project Director for ARIP for the engineering of Lambeth Palace. So we are the engineers for the project, and that covers a multitude of things, from structures through MEP servicing and sustainability. At its simplest, this project was around the resurfacing of the building. We moved away from doing a like-for-like refurbishment to actually thinking, what does the palace really need for now and in the future, with a very strong view on sustainability. So how do we have a positive impact in terms of improving the resilience of the palace, but also thinking about how we can have a positive impact on climate change. One of the other things which I think was really important was about looking at how the building performs in the future. And so with climate change, we've seen that the rainwater intensity of storms is actually increasing. So although it feels like we're getting dry, we are getting drier, but we're also getting wilder. And so trying to think about what that might do. So we basically analysed all the roofs. We kind of threw some design storms at the building to see where it would kind of start getting wet. And so we went from everything from a 1-year storm all the way up to a 1 in 110-year storm, which is kind of designing against climate change. And then we verified that with the palace team to sort of see actually where are you getting problems. They said actually is this roof here, this roof here. So then what we did was think about how we can then look at the capacity of the system as it currently stands and then improve it. So certain places we changed the falls of gutter so that if we knew we had a bit more capacity over here, we could swap the gutter out going over that way. We also installed some additional downpipes inside the building so the historic facade isn't changed, but we do get that extra capacity. So we went from a building that would fall over pretty much every year to going up to 110 years. So fingers crossed we don't get that next year. So part of the work we want to do around Lambeth Palace was show what could be done in terms of using rainwater harvesting to flush the toilets. So we take rainwater from the roofs and use it to flush the toilets here, which is the main toilet block. The benefit of that is that it has the highest density of use, so more of the water is flushed here than anywhere else in the palace. So we invested the tank for here rather than distributing it all over.
Perhaps not surprisingly, but remarkably, the building has a huge amount of stonework, and that's a really important skill to think about restoring and looking after historic stonework. One of the parts of the project that was really important is about sort of keeping alive craft skills and helping bring apprentices into that conversation so that we're helping to have a legacy for the next generation, keeping that skill of looking after historic stonework. We have here that the lovely stonework has been beautifully cleaned and restored. So the extraordinary amount of, I think it's 800 square meters of stonework repaired and cleaned across the building as part of the project. And that's important for a number of reasons. It's important because it cares for the main building material of this project, which keeps it sustainable into the future and conserves it according to best conservation practice. But it's also important because of the skills inherent in that work. And here, Lambeth Palace and the Church of England are contributing to the continuation of those really vital historic heritage skills which we need to continue into the future. And so the craftspeople who've done this work really beautifully and the apprentices who've also done that work and are carrying that special heritage skill into the future is a really important component of the conservation and the sustainability project at Lambeth Palace.
When you kind of find archaeology on a construction project, there's always a bit of a worry because you know that perhaps kind of spells delays. But what it also means is that there's the possibility of expanding the story and the history of the palace. So working with a Museum of London Archaeology, we're able to kind of reveal quite a lot of archaeology in the grounds of the palace, because it was necessary in order to route the services to the main buildings. And through that we found medieval archaeology, dating from the 12th to the 15th century, evidence of the kind of Tudor manor from the 1500s. It was really kind of fascinating. So the services that run from the energy centre in the service yard go through underneath the ground here and then head up towards the palace, that side. So we're within these kind of grounds is where a lot of the archaeology was found. So in about this area, up there was a cesspit that was made of chalk foundations, which is quite significant, and Museum of Archaeology got quite interested about that. And about this location, there was an ancient hearth as well, which they kind of gathered deposits from to kind of work out whenabouts that kind of dated from. So it was kind of all along here, but through all this kind of discovery, it was about making sure that it was all carefully recorded, and then having discussion with Historic England about what had to be kept, and what we were able to remove in order to allow for the pipe work and electrical cabling that needs to come from the energy centre to help serve the Bloor building and all the other buildings across the estate. In the end, I think it does make the project more beneficial. For example, we did have to move one services route to another area in order to protect like a historic hearth that was found there in the past. But it also means that in the future, another 100 years, when someone digs up the ground, they're able to work out the story of the palace. So yeah, it's not just about now, it's about what happens 100 years from now. As part of the initial briefing for the palace, what was one of the key points was about hospitality and making sure that the palace could be a place of welcome. And as part of that mission, creating a kitchen space that was able to allow the catering of larger events for the Church of England was extremely important. So we had a look at the historic information and found that the kitchens used to be in the cloisters area before they got migrated to another area of the building. So we thought we put it back there. So in the hub between the Great Hall and the guard room, you have a kitchen which is up to modern standards that allows the palace to be able to cater for elements of hospitality.
I think for me it's about integrating some really appropriately sustainable technology into a historic fabric. So we're on the roof of the Energy Centre, and you might be able to hear a slight hum. That's one of the 3 air source heat pumps that are running. They're essentially like a fridge in your kind of home, but instead of producing the cool, this is producing the heat. It's the equivalent of about 10 domestic-sized boilers, and that's providing the heat for the palace behind. Originally, the building was heated with huge boilers, which are in the, one of the towers. Air source heat pumps, which are a fossil-free way of producing the heating, they need access to air, and so it would be inappropriate to try and put them in a tower. So actually, we put them adjacent to the main road, but in an area where they can get plenty of air, and that's what drives the heating sustainably. So moving from the old boilers to 3 250 kilowatt air source heat pumps, and they're providing the heating in a sustainable way to the palace.
So it's really important that we think about how we make historic buildings more accessible for all users today, and that's something that all those who care for historic buildings need to think really carefully about and find that right balance. So it's really important when we think about the main entrance into Lambeth Palace at the moment and how that's been made beautifully accessible for all. The elegant ramp, the elegant way that's been sort of transformed into the facade and the entranceway to the building, and the way to bring all users up either via the stair or via the lift into the main hall is a really thoughtful way with professional advice that we've been able to bring that crucial point of accessibility into a remarkable historic building. It's listed at grade 1, so that means it has special architectural and historic interest to the whole nation, and it's really important that we look after that. But of course, it's most important that we look after people as well, and bringing those two things together really beautifully and thoughtfully will hopefully show others who are grappling with historic sites ways that they can do that in a way that sort of finds a perfect balance really between accessibility and historic interest.
I think it's about thinking of what's possible and where you're trying to get to, and I think sometimes the results are surprising. So we thought that we wouldn't be able to change the windows. We're trying to, from the outset, we're trying to change the fabric and improve it. You know, it's not rocket science. You know, you're always told, improve the insulation in your roof, you know, put double glazing in. And we thought that we wouldn't be able to change the windows, but it turns out the windows are not original. They're actually a bit of a pastiche. So we were able to go to double glazing. And that one change saved us 41% of the heating demands, which is fantastic.
One of the elements of the project that I'm most proud of is being able to strip out all the kind of existing services, replace them all, and still for the building to feel like Lambeth Palace, to still feel like a home for people that live here, and a heritage space for people who work here, and you know, still a religious space for people who pray here. And I think that was very important to me and to my colleagues.
One of the things that really came together on this project was the wonderful brief that we got set by the church. They have a commitment to net zero carbon by 2050. So we thought, can we achieve it with this building? And there was a couple of sideways glances between me and Mel, our head of sustainability, when we did our sustainability workshop, and we thought, we'll give it a go, we'll see what we can do. And actually a building of this nature, which is kind of like very heavyweight, you can do a lot to it, which is great. We see this as sort of a proof of concept to show how you can take, you know, what's, you know, beyond a listed building. It's an absolutely historic icon to sort of say, if we can do it here, then you can do it in so many places. And we've had fantastic feedback from people like Historic England, who have been really interested about how we've done it and kind of interested to know more. So that was kind of one of the unbriefed items to sort of say this should be both an exemplar and a challenge, if you will, to future projects coming forwards.
But now it's done, I look back and I think, actually, it just looks so stunning. When you look at the finished product, when you look and see what's been achieved, when you look and you think of the carbon, it's 51% carbon reduction in the building. When you think of all the work that's gone into it, I think just as an overall project, it's just something to be proud of for everybody.
People have worshipped here, people have lived here, people have worked here. And so when you have a project to renovate it, to restore it, when you have this sort of work done, you're not just thinking about the next 10 years, you're thinking about people worshipping in this space for many, many decades and centuries into the future. So it's such important work, and it's so valuable, not just to us in the here and now, but to generations to come.
Hopefully it gives everyone a real lift to walk through these corridors and kind of feel we haven't been here, and to know that under the skin of the building we've done an incredible modernising of the building, but it's all been done with an incredibly light touch and a careful hand, and anyone would still feel the history and not feel we've been too intrusive. This is a project that's going to last for many, many generations. This is a place of hospitality, a place of prayer, and many, many generations are going to benefit from the legacy of this project, which is quite a wonderful feeling for the whole team to know we've left that legacy behind.